Aneurin Bevan was the Labour Health Minister instrumental in setting up both the National Health Service and the modern welfare state, and he said this in 1944. Honest politics and Tory politics are contradictions in terms. Lying is a necessary part of a Tory's political equipment, for it is essential for him to conceal his political intentions from the people. This is partly the reason for his success in keeping power. Nearly 80 years later, Nye Bevan's words seem pertinent, fresh and contemporary, and equally so when applied to Brexit. I've taken the liberty of adapting the great man's quote. Honest politics and Brexit politics are contradictions in terms. Lying is a necessary part of a Brexitist's political equipment, for it is essential for him to conceal his political intentions from the people. This is partly the reason for his success in getting and keeping Brexit. The political intentions of your Nigel Farages and Jacob Rees-Moggs, your Boris Johnsons and Rishi Sunaks, they have nothing to do with the well-being of the country or the well-being of deluded voters who back their Russia-funded, dishonest and law-breaking Leave campaign, and everything to do with burnishing their own wealth and or political prospects. Stay tuned. I'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button, subscribe, and above all, share a link to this video with your social media contacts. Despite the protestations that Brexit never happened from the flat earther wing of the Brexitist movement, Brexit has happened. OK, in the words of the godfather of Brexit, Nigel Farage himself, Brexit has failed. But Britain is now a separate entity from the EU and is now legally a so-called third country, separate from the EU. From next year, the EU is bringing in visas for travellers from all non-EU countries to check that they don't outstay their legally allotted residence slot. But some of our most strident Brexitist leaders are calling this measure revenge from the EU because they're still punishing the plucky UK for Brexit. I even hear this EU revenge narrative from Leave voting friends and family who have not yet escaped from the Mail/Express/GB News rabbit hole. Yet the British are only being treated in the same way as travellers from all non-EU countries. And the new 2024 EU visa requirements are similar to the type of visa that Brits already need to travel to the USA or Australia. Brexit voters truly believed in those lies about British exceptionalism. Here's John, now Lord Moynihan, speaking during the Leave campaign. The EU needs a trade deal with us more than we need a trade deal with them. To use James O'Brien's favourite phrase, the answer to that is not an opinion, it's counting. The UK, 1 country. The European single market, 30 countries. And when Priti Patel boasted about ending freedom of movement.
At this defining moment in our country's history, I have a particular responsibility when it comes to taking back control. It is to end the free movement of people once and for all.
How many of those Leave voters clapping in that hall or cheering her on in the country actually realised they were metaphorically being bent over and shafted by Priti Patel as she removed their personal right to move freely across the EU? The delays at Dover and the airports were always going to happen to Brits travelling to Europe after we left the EU. It's just that none of the Take Back Control mob bothered to tell that to the voters. Except it's worse than that. Remember Nye Bevan's claim that lying is a necessary part of a Tory's political equipment, for it is essential for him to conceal his political intentions from the people. Leave voters were not just uninformed by their heroes, they were lied to. I have some examples here, but as you watch them, remember, these Brexitist talking heads refer to Norway, Switzerland and Iceland, who all enjoy freedom of movement across the European Economic Area. And also remember that the single market of which they speak means freedom of movement of goods, services, capital and people.
Absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market. Yeah, Norway, Switzerland, all of these countries have complete free trade with the EU. And by the way, I can't help noticing that they're doing pretty well. But to repeat, absolutely nobody is talking about threatening our place in the single market.
Because only a madman would actually leave the market.
We have a great independent future, just as countries like Norway and Switzerland enjoy.
We'll find ourselves part of the European Economic Area and with a free trade deal.
Well, actually, Norway, Iceland and Switzerland do pretty well.
You see what I mean? People voting Leave were told it wouldn't affect their freedom of movement prior to the advisory referendum. No wonder those Leave voters queuing at the port of Dover for 6 hours last week feel betrayed. You might think they were daft to believe the lies. But to be fair, they were told that Brexit was not going to impact their travel abroad, that it would be just a matter of formality. They were never given the correct information on the outcome of a vote to leave the EU. In other words, they were lied to like everyone else. Just as we were by Boris Johnson over the £350 million a week NHS boost, David Davis promising a no downsides deal, and Jacob Rees-Mogg assuring us that food bills would plummet. Lies, lies and more lies. My adaptation of Nye Bevan's great words again. Lying is a necessary part of a Brexitist's political equipment, for it is essential for him to conceal his political intentions from the people. Sadly, as the self-harming consequences of the big lies about Brexit become reality, there are still millions who believe in Brexit, blaming its obvious and tangible failure on poor implementation or EU sabotage, or parroting the Rees-Mogg excuse that it'll be 50 years before we see the benefits, or on the other extreme, even deluding themselves that Brexit hasn't actually happened yet. All very sad. But even sadder is the fact that many millions more of us who weren't so gullible have to live with the consequences of those wicked lies told by Tory Brexitists in order to conceal their true intentions from the people. Because, for sure, at this point, even being allowed to apply to join the EU looks incredibly unlikely. Article 2 of the Treaty on European Union sets out the prerequisites for any aspiring member. The Union is founded on the values of respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law and respect for human rights, including the rights of persons belonging to minorities. With Deputy Chairman of the Conservative Party, 30p Lee Anderson, telling migrants to fuck off back to France this week, I think respect for human dignity is somewhat lacking with our current political masters. Article 49 of the EU Treaty sets out the procedure through which countries can apply to join the EU. Any European state which respects the values referred to in Article 2 and is committed to promoting them may apply to become a member of the Union. The UK, under a Conservative government, falls at that first hurdle, as the Tories are currently discussing plans to make leaving the European Convention on Human Rights part of their manifesto at the next general election, joining a select band of other countries who have left the ECHR, namely Russia and Belarus. Hardly a commitment to promote Article 2's requirements for a respect for human dignity, freedom, democracy, equality, the rule of law and respect for human rights. Article 49 again. The applicant state shall address its application to the Council, which will act unanimously after consulting the Commission. The European Council is made up of the heads of state or government of all EU countries, plus the European Council President and the European Commission President. After the way the exceptionalist UK behaved whilst a member of the EU, with its never-ending demands for opt-outs, and the pugnacious way our right-wing Brexit negotiators went into a verbal war with the EU when negotiating the withdrawal agreement, even going so far as to send Royal Navy vessels to fishing grounds in UK territorial waters, I don't honestly believe there would be much adjustment to the treaties just to facilitate the UK rejoining. I'd imagine, to stand any chance of a unanimous acceptance by the European Council, the UK would have to accept the Euro, membership of the Schengen area, and full freedom of movement. Despite what voters were told during the Leave campaign, the UK isn't special. It's a medium-sized economy off the coast of the European landmass, and getting more medium by the day, by the way, as its economy is overtaken by that of other European countries. Projections calculated by the Labour Party based on current World Bank data on GDP per capita growth rates show the UK economy being overtaken by first Poland in the next few years, and then Romania and Hungary. Now, no disrespect to those countries. I myself have close family ties to Poland and have spent time there. But this is what 13 years of Tory rule, with its austerity programme that led to Brexit, has done to the UK, diminishing its economy, its international standing and its reputation. There are no shortcuts to rejoining. In fact, I believe that being a former member who chose to leave, that will make entry even more difficult for the UK. The EU would want guarantees that we're not going to walk out again. So until such time as both the governing party and the largest opposition party fully back a return to EU membership, I can see no reason why the EU would even countenance an application under Article 49. And let's be quite clear, I'm no fan of Keir Starmer. I'm bitterly disappointed in him and decisions he's made that moved the current Labour Party to the right of the John Major and David Cameron governments. But he is literally correct to say that rejoining the EU is not an option. There is no rejoin option now, if rejoin is seen as a return to the status quo before Brexit happened. If the UK wants to join the EU, I believe it can only be on the same terms as any other prospective member country, with little or no negotiations. Take it or leave it.
Everything will be confiscated. Welcome to the Brexit, sir. I'm sorry.
Oh my God.